Hello, YouTube. My name is Alan, and it's that time once again. Let's talk metal. For this video, it's going to be sort of a good old-fashioned collection update. Haven't done one of these in quite a while, and frankly, it's just due to the fact that I haven't picked up a ton of stuff in 2025. There's been a couple of times I've picked up a pile of stuff, but I just haven't done collection videos on them. I haven't been ordering a whole lot of stuff. I've picked up very, very few new releases this year. A lot of it's just needing money for other things, trying to catch up on music that I already own and haven't played in a long time or picked up recently and haven't given a lot of time to. But recently, I did find out about a new record store in North Carolina, and I went to check it out. And sure enough, there was some really, really good stuff in it. I'm going to include a link to their stuff down below if I remember. I met the fellow at record shows. He sets up at some of the record shows in the North Carolina area. Usually has some really cool old metal and punk stuff. Really nice guy, very knowledgeable in what he knows. His name is Jason. The name of the store is JG's Vinyl and More, and it's in Gastonia, North Carolina, which is I guess it counts as a suburb of Charlotte. It's at least Charlotte adjacent. It's an area I've been to a few times, but yeah, the last time I saw him at a record show, he mentioned they had just recently opened up a brick and mortar store. And then the last record show in North Carolina, I didn't make it to. The timing was all wrong. I had other stuff going on that weekend. It didn't, again, really feel like I had money to spend on a record show, so I skipped that one. But at the time, I kind of decided, well, since I'm not going to the show, it may be next month or something, I'll find a weekend or an afternoon where I can, run up to Gastonia and check out the store, which is exactly what I did. Really cool store, a lot of stuff inside it. It's a really good space. It was really easy to get to also. And unsurprisingly, found some really neat stuff. So let's take a look at what I bought. First up, we have Gravedigger's Heavy Metal Breakdown. This is kind of one of the iconic German heavy metal albums from 1984. 84 being one of those key years when heavy metal was, the thing, and a lot of the best releases came out. A lot of people cite 1984 as the best year for heavy metal. You can make a case for 1986, some other years you can contend also. But yeah, 84 releases, there's a laundry list of great ones. Heavy Metal Breakdown is a really fun one. It's the Gravedigger debut. A lot of great tracks on it with Headbanging Man and the title track, Heavy Metal Breakdown, We Want to Rock You, and such. And this one is an original Noise Records pressing. It's got the merch postcard included with it as well. Now, I'd always known there was a difference between the noise pressing and the US pressings that got licensed because I've had the US pressing. This is on Megaforce. And for the US pressing, they added this little outline of North America up here, which I always thought looked incredibly stupid. It doesn't fit with the theme of the cover at all, which I actually like the cover. I've always thought it was a really cool one with, yeah, the planet Earth is kind of a skull and the giant cross exploding, crashing into it, or exploding out of it, or impacting it, whatever. Cool cover. But this feels just so out of place and tacked on. Never did like it much. So that's one reason I decided I did want to pick up the noise pressing when I found it at the store, because it doesn't have that stupid outline up there for no particular reason. Something I didn't know until I got this home and compared the two is the track lists are different. The noise pressing has a song that's not on the Megaforce pressing. The Megaforce pressing has a couple of songs that aren't on the noise pressing. This kind of thing was very common in the early and mid 80s when albums would get licensed in other countries, especially US pressings versus European pressings. Sometime we'll probably sit down and make a video with different examples of it, but Heavy Metal Breakdown is a good example of that. And it turns out the unique track on the noise pressing, 20,000 Light Years from Home, is actually a really, really good song. So it's an album I like. It does have its ups and downs. The faster, more headbanging tracks are the better ones. The tracks where they kind of slow down or go at a slightly more mid pace aren't their strongest numbers. I mean, Gravedigger was better when they were going faster and heavier. But yeah, very cool to get the noise pressing of that. So that got a unique track. And I have a copy that doesn't have that stupid outline of North America for. Yeah. Did they really think that was going to like convince more people to buy it or something? It's like, huh, I found this thing in the rack. Should I buy it? Well, it's got an outline of the continent I live on, so obviously I want to pick that up. Hmm, what can you say? All right, number two on the list is I got an old pressing of Holy Terror, Mind Wars. This is the Under One flag press. Well, the sleeve back here is opaque, so you can't really see anything. But yeah, Under One flag pressing of Mind Wars, one of the great speed metal albums of the late 1980s. Marty and I have talked about this one a number of times over on Heavy Metallurgy. Pretty sure they did an album club on a Wednesday night with this album as well. I might be mistaken, but I feel like they definitely have. For this one, I'd never had an original copy of it. Several years ago, I picked up a reissue, but there's an issue with the reissue. Yeah. See if you can spot the problem. Yeah, like on a lot of reissues, the cover gets printed much darker than the original. And so on this reissue, you can barely see anything up here. It's, a dark blob on a slightly less dark blob, which is really annoying. Compare that here to the original I just picked up. Oh, yeah, big monster ripping apart the cross and such, which was kind of their cover art motif. Some have something kind of similar on the cover of their debut album, Terror and Submission. So yeah, great album, like it a lot, and really happy to have a version where I can see the bloody cover of it as opposed to the reissue. The reissue sounds fine. It's on red vinyl with kind of a white splatter to it. I think it's on back on black, maybe. Again, I won't bother pulling it out to check right now, but it's perfectly listenable reissue. But it always bugged me that the cover didn't show up. If the cover had been really nice, might not have picked up the original. Yeah, it's cool to have it. Might have saved the money for something else instead. But given that the reissues cover bugged me, I was like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and splurge a little bit and get a copy of the older press where I can see the art. All right, moving on to number three. Picked up a copy of this. It's by the band Sword out of Canada, and the album is called Metallized, their debut. This is one people have told me about for ages, and I just never got around to checking out. King Fowley's mentioned this album on numerous occasions. Jeff over at Gas Masks and Hand Grenades has mentioned this album, unless I'm terribly mistaken. Other people too have always said, like, yeah, that's a cool album. And I always felt like, yeah, okay, I'll check it out sometime. But I just never did. Never came across a cheap copy. Never occurred to me on those days where you're sitting there, things like, okay, what do I want to type into YouTube to check out today? Oh, yeah, let's check out Sword. It never floated to the top of my mental must-hear list. But I saw I had a copy of it. It's in pretty nice condition. All the stuff was in really nice condition, by the way. And so I was like, oh, well, maybe today's the day I buy that. Although I never really did check it out. I guess I could play a little bit of it on my phone here while I flip through records. But Jason mentions that, hey, if there's something that you want to hear, I can put it on the turntable in the system here in the store. I was like, oh, well, let's see what this sounds like. He's like, oh, cool. I don't know what it sounds like either. In my mind, I had it listed as Canadian speed metal, and that is incorrect. This is not a speed metal album. What it is a very good sort of power metal album, but 80s style, North American power metal, not, power metal the way it tends to get used today with European bands, with, lots of guitar solos and the same exact double bass drum, and probably capes or elf ears or dragon swords made out of styrofoam waving around. No, this is a lot closer to something along the lines of, say, a metal church, Vicious Rumors, Wild Dogs, the heavier end of TKO, maybe. It's those kind of bands, which it tends to be in my wheelhouse. I like that stuff quite a bit. So yeah, when he played this in the store, both of us right away were really impressed with it. It's like, that's really, really good. Good vocalist, good guitar patterns. First couple of tracks on this have a really kind of solid, Iron Maiden inspired type heavy metal. There are some variations here. Sword apparently started out life as a Kiss tribute band, which I didn't know when I bought it. Doesn't affect this at all. They do have some songs where they veer a little bit more into not glam metal, not like Poison or something, but you do hear maybe a little bit of a sleazy element infiltrate some of the more mid-paced songs. And you can kind of tell by looking at the song titles which ones are this is going to happen on. For example, let's see, what do we got here? There's a song called Stuck in Rock. It's going to be hard to make that into like a really solid headbanging number, ain't it? Yeah, there's one called, I think, Stoned Again. Yeah, this ain't a stoner rock band, so yeah, it comes across again a little bit on the sleaze side, but it's still a heavy kind of, sleaze element to it. These are kind of obscure references, but I would put those songs in the same camp as something like DT Rocks or Rod Squad, or again, like the heavier, tougher end of TKO's catalog, which is good stuff. So even though those songs feel a little different, you could tell maybe they're hedging their bets, trying a few different styles here. Lots of bands did it on their debut albums back in the early and mid 80s. The really solid metal tracks on here are great, and the songs that, yeah, have a little bit of that sleaze element, they actually work pretty damn well too. They're not ridiculous or cheesy to the point of being like, oh, they weren't hoping for a hit single or MTV play or something. It's not that kind of material. So yeah, bottom line, everybody was right. I should have checked this album out a long time ago. It is really, really good and was a nice surprise to pick up. Getting to hear a few of the tracks there in the store definitely helped. It's another one where at the end of the day, when I'm figuring out what to carry up to the cash register, if I had never heard a note of it, would it have made it to the cash register? Honestly, I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Might have been one of those cases where I'm like, maybe I save this money and leave that one behind. But I'm really glad I didn't. I'm enjoying the album a bunch. All right, I think next up, number four, we have the debut album from Vicious Rumors, Soldiers of the Night. This is a Shrapnel release. This was another band I passed over for a long time. Folks were like, you should check them out. I'm like, check them out someday. And then I never did. But finally, Jeff over at Gas Masks and Hand Grenades kept after me about this band. He's like, "You will like this band. Just check them out." It's like, okay. So I found a cheap copy of their sophomore album, Digital Dictator. Picked it up. Pretty cool stuff. That one also got the album club treatment over on Heavy Metallurgy. And I knew the first album would be a bit different because they had a different vocalist on this one. It's, I believe, Gary St. Pierre, who had sung with the band Hawaii on their 1983 album, the One Nation Underground album, not the Natives Are Restless album. They had a different vocalist on that one. Vicious Rumors with this one being on Shrapnel, that right away should tell you some things about what the sound is going to be like. It's going to have really good guitar work, and it's going to be in that US power metal style where it's not maybe as gruff or heavy as Metal Church, and it's also not quite as cleaned up as, say, Queensryche. It's going to fall in that little niche in between the two where you're like, okay, you can hear a little bit of both sides, but with an emphasis on really, really hot shot guitar stuff. That was always kind of Shrapnel's thing. So bands you would compare this, when I started playing this, right away I started thinking like, okay, this sounds a lot like the first two Hex albums, kind of like some early Wild Dogs. And then it started to occur to me, it's like all these are Shrapnel bands that are coming to mind. So yeah, Shrapnel had a lane, and they got a lot of bands that were in that lane. And a lot of these albums are actually pretty good. Shrapnel got a little bit of a bad reputation over the years. And I think part of the problem was a lot of people's main exposure to Shrapnel is the compilation series they put out called US Metal. They did 3 volumes of it, to my knowledge. There's not a lot of hidden gems on the US metal scene. There's some good bands here and there, don't get me wrong. There's a Manila Road track on one of them. There are some other good tracks on them. They're even kind of hard to come to mind if I'm not looking at them. A lot of them are just kind of, guitar shred guys with, people playing behind them. Sure, they could play fancy guitar stuff, but the songs didn't come together in a lot of cases. And so I think that kind of taints people's perception of Shrapnel a little bit. But it turns out Shrapnel did put out a lot of actually really good albums by some of the better bands. And they've kind of become hard to find over the years. They never had as much visibility or distribution as something like Metal Blade or Roadrunner. And so, yeah, copies dried up a long time ago, and you just never see them anymore. Another band I could compare this one to for sure would be Sword, that I just showed, the Canadian band. This one's operating in a similar overall style. Now, on the Vicious Rumors album here, they don't stray into that kind of slightly sleazy feeling material at all. The hang up for Vicious Rumors is that the lyrics are interesting. You could tell they didn't have much practice writing lyrics yet. There are some just, very weird word choices, very weird line structures. And it's like, if I didn't know better, I'd assume English was your second or possibly third language. It's not a huge detractor. The songs are really good throughout. There's only one track on here I think that I feel is maybe a little bit of a swing and a miss. Still getting used to all these. I've played them all just a handful of times so far. But yeah, the Vicious Rumors, Soldiers of the Night album could definitely be, comparable to the Sword metalized album. If you've heard the Sword and you've never heard this Vicious Rumors, they're in the same ballpark. So another one that glad I picked it up. It had always been in the back of my mind to check out since I liked Digital Dictator, but this is the first time I've come across a copy of it in the wild and was glad to add it. This one was like, yeah, I'm taking that home for sure. Number five. And just to be clear, he had CDs and stuff in the store too, but I just ended up picking up vinyl this time. Number five is a copy of The Forgotten Scroll, which is the debut album by Apocrypha. This was a band out of Las Vegas. This is another Shrapnel Records release. So again, there's going to be some hotshot guitar stuff on here. The guitarist on here is Tony Fredianelli. Uh, and yeah, he is a pretty sick guitarist. There's a lot of neoclassical flourishes worked in throughout, a lot of shred. But the songs are always moving forward. This isn't just show off time for Tony. The whole band is definitely on board and doing some pretty cool stuff. Stylistically, this is more in a power thrash style. So a bit heavier than the Sword or the Vicious Rumors album. Power thrash is the best descriptor for it. They're leaning in more of a thrashy direction with some of the riffs and the aggressiveness, but it's not fully there. You wouldn't say this is another Bay Area band or anything like that. They're in between that US power metal style and that thrash style. Might put them as such closer to a band like Hellstar. I need to play this some more to be confident saying that. I feel like I owned a copy of The Forgotten Scroll way back in the day on cassette tape. I know I used to see it on cassette quite a bit at some of the record stores I used to frequent. Maybe I had just a dubbed copy of it or something. I've heard the album in the past, but it's been years and years and years since I've heard it. So saw it just like, oh yeah, I wouldn't mind picking that one back up. And so let's add it to the stack. And I'm glad I did. Again, a lot of these were albums that I either never had heard or not heard in ages. So yeah, they're kind of pseudo blind buys in a way, but they've worked out really, really well in this case. Item number six. Let's see. Yeah, this was one of the first ones I found because somehow I managed to wander my way to the end of the metal section and actually worked my way backwards through the alphabet. Didn't matter, but it meant that I started out like in the W, X, Y, Z, and V section, which is where I found a copy of Voivod's Killing Technology. This is the Noise International Press, so it says both Noise and Combat on the labels. I've never owned a physical copy of Killing Technology before. I've had it on MP3 for at least 15 years. I think I literally got it in 2010 on MP3s. And, Voivod's one of those bands I keep trying to go back to and work on a little bit. They've never really been the band for me, never quite wrapped my head around them. But there's been some stuff I liked by them. Not too long ago, I guess earlier this year, I picked up a copy of Roar on vinyl. Ended up getting into it a little bit. It's like, okay, this is kind of cool. Killing Technology is one that I've always kind of thought I was like, I remember liking it, but never fully digesting it. And kind of going back through, notes I'd taken on it. Yes, I do keep notes sometimes on things I listen to. I'm that kind of spreadsheet nerd. I also, though, noticed there are times where I've played Killing Technology that it didn't really click with me. Like in like early 2011 when I had played it some, then it's basically like, this isn't really connecting well for me. I'm not sure it's my kind of thing. But then I'd play it a few years later and be like, okay, it's kind of sinking in. This I kind of dig. A couple of things that have always hung me up on Voivod. One, yeah, the vocals with Snake, when he gets into that more robotic style of delivery, it doesn't quite suit me. It's not like it's terrible, but I'm not nuts about it. That's always an issue. The second thing is always they have, that kind of, very quote unquote angular kind of riffing. I guess, like lots of bent strings and described as like angular chord shapes and stuff. I'm not a musician, so I don't always know exactly what the, point of those things is or what their total overall impact is on the music. I just know that it's a sound that I have a hard time wrapping my head around. But, Killing Technology is one I've been back and forth on over the years. And I feel like in the past 2 years or so, I've come around on more of this type of metal where it's a little more unique, a little more challenging, but distinctive. So I'm more than happy to give Killing Technology another shot. It's the kind of thing, again, you just don't see older copies on vinyl much anymore. They had it, it's there, it's a reasonable price, it's in nice shape. Absolutely, I will pick it up and I will give it another try. And if it doesn't work out, I'll do something else with it. We shall see. All right, that is six. So yeah, I went through all the record boxes and pulled out those six to pick up. And he had a lot of, kind of, nicer, sort of more expensive or rare items on the wall back behind the counter, which I had noticed when I first walked in. I was just like, okay, I'll go back and look at these. Let me see what else I find, though. I wasn't looking to just buy a bunch of stuff off the wall. That gets really expensive really fast. But there was one that I was curious about. And just if you want some examples of the kinds of things they had on the wall in the store, early Megadeth LP pressings, copy of Violence, Eternal Nightmare, old copy of Bonded by Blood. And of course, the store has other non-metal stuff too. Some one or two things he pointed out that were kind of cool. He had a sealed copy of the soundtrack from A Clockwork Orange. So I was like, okay, haven't seen that movie in ages, but that's pretty freaking cool. But the one that caught my eye is like, what pressing is that up there? And he looked at me, he's kind of smiled. He's like, you're going to like that. And I'm just like, oh, he's like, it's a first press. I'm like, really? He's like, well, it's kind of an odd first press. I'm like, okay, what do you mean? The album that I was pointing at was this one. I had a copy of Sepultura's Morbid Visions on the wall. Sepultura is a band that I never really dug back through their catalog. I was one of the kids that didn't know about them until the Arise video, or sorry, Dead Embryonic Cells video was getting shown on MTV with the release of Arise. I liked Arise. I liked Chaos AD okay. I never really worked my way back through their catalog for whatever reason. Just, again, never got around to it until the past several years. And then it's like, oh, okay, yeah, some of these other albums are really good too. Oh, well, at least better late than never. What can I say? So, yeah, he says like it's a weird pressing. So he says, first pressing, I'm thinking is like, is it actually like the Cogumelo pressing? That'd be a hell of a thing, but it's not that. He's like, no, it's a first pressing, but not a first pressing. It's a test pressing. It is a test press. Then this was done for the pressing on new Renaissance records. So the US pressing, which came out a year or two after, Morbid Visions, the archives list is officially coming out in 86, and the new Renaissance version came out in 87 or 88, depending on which website you look at. But yeah, so you can see that it was, tagged to be, NRR, New Renaissance Records, with Sepultura. And so I was like, oh my, that is really freaking cool. Um, this is the kind of oddball thing that Jason has, had once or twice when I've come across him at record shows. And just like, okay, it's a really, really clean copy and stuff. So I'm like, that's interesting. How much are we talking? And obviously, I'm not mentioning prices here on stuff. You mention prices and people just get hung up on the prices. I'm just would rather focus on the bands and the music. Doesn't matter what I paid for them. I thought the prices were okay, or I wouldn't have bought them. Something like this one is really hard to price in the first place. And he mentioned that, and I knew that. If you look on Discogs, there are a handful of copies of this particular test press that sold, but they all sold back in the 2010s. I think the most recent sale of it was 2018. So at this point, it's been 7 years since Discogs has a record of it. Maybe some copies have turned up more recently on Pop that are listed through PopPsych. PopPsych is not an easy one to dig through, especially when you're, standing in a store trying to negotiate something. Discogs is easy to look at. PopPsych digging is kind of a headache. Regardless, he had a price in mind, and something, but I'm also buying a bigger stack of records. Something that worked out and helped this one come home with me. Unbeknownst to me, the day I decided I would take the afternoon off and drive up and check out the store was a day they had put a 15% sale off everything in the store, kind of promotion on. So he's like, well, it's in the store. You still get the 15% off, even that. As it's like, okay, let's do some math. That's getting into a point where I think I'm comfortable uh, picking that one up. It's the kind of thing like it's there in person, not something that you're ordering from, God knows where through Discogs or eBay, hoping it shows up, hoping it's in the right condition, hoping it's the right pressing. You're just not going to stumble into something like that in the wild many times. Like, yeah, it wasn't cheap, it wasn't free, but again, Jason was, again, the prices were reasonable. He knows what the stuff's worth. He's not going to give it away, but he's not overcharging for stuff either. So it's like, you know what? I have not, picked up many older collectible things lately. There's been one or two here or there, but this one just hits me the right way. That's a really cool, version of that album. Not likely to stumble into it again. It's like, well, if we include that with these others, let's work something out. And we did, and yeah, I'm okay with that. So yeah, that was the seventh and last thing that I picked up. A test pressing of Morbid Visions from Sepultura. There's a lot of other cool stuff in the store too, but yeah, he definitely was already kind of pushing the limit of how much I wanted to spend for the day. So I'm like, they're just going to stop right here and maybe in a few months catch him at another record show or run back up to the store if I have an afternoon off and see what kind of new things he's picked up, and we'll see what comes home next time. But that is going to do it for this particular video. Now let's talk metal in the comments down below. Have you come across any new stores in your area that have opened up and they're carrying some fun stuff that you're enjoying digging through? Um, Test pressing is something that you collect, something that you couldn't care less about. The music's the same, but they're a neat thing, but some people go nuts for them. Some people couldn't care less about them. I don't collect test pressings in particular, but this one I felt like it was a cool enough and unique enough item that I had to pick it up. If you had found it for a reasonable price in the store, would you have bought it or would you have been like, yeah, I'm fine with whatever version I've got of it already? Let me know in the comments down below what you think. And again, I will try to remember to put the link to like some of their stores' socials down there. So that if anybody's in the greater Charlotte area looking to do some record shopping, you can check in with them. If I don't have the link down there and you want it, that information, just post a comment saying, hey, you forgot to include the link to their socials, and I'll be happy to add it in the comments. I'm bad about remembering to add those kind of things when I get the videos posted. But that is going to do it for now. So until next time, everybody take care. I've got 7 new records to go play some more, so it's going to keep me busy for a while. Until next time, everybody have a great time, and as always, keep banging your head.